Hi guys, welcome back to Honest Straightforward Reviews. Today I'm excited to bring to you a comparison, both physical and in every other aspects, and also in my personal use, between the iPad Pro 10.5 inch, which came in 2017, came out in 2017, and the iPad Air 2020. This is the fourth generation, which is the current one. Before we continue, I'd like to let you guys know a few things about the channel. This channel completely survives on your subscriptions. It's for free. It makes it unbiased, and I don't have any sponsors or things like that to help out. So you guys subscribing and checking out my Patreon and on Instagram and everything really helps out. All right, let's continue now. First of all, let's talk about them side by side. This iPad is a tiny bit taller, okay, and this one's a tiny bit wider. All right, as you guys can see now. Even though you can probably see that this is a bit thicker, but that's just a, let's say, mirage, a trick on your eye, and that's because of this being curved. The iPad Pro is actually a bit thicker and also a tiny bit, so 0.7 of an inch thicker, and also about 7 or 8 grams heavier as well, which is absolutely unnoticeable. You can get this in 512 gigabytes, which you can't for this. Well, you couldn't. And also the screen has a bit more pixel density on the iPad Pro. Now, I just wanted to let you guys know the reason I'm doing this comparison is between these two is because the iPad Pro, for me, the 10.5 was one of the best innovations that Apple did, and introduced the Pro Motion 120 Hertz display, which this doesn't. Okay, so the main difference between these two guys is 60 Hertz panel, 120, very smooth. And it's not that silly IPO panel that they've put on the iPhone 13 Pro and the Pro Max and selling it as a good thing. This is all the time 120 hertz, okay, and it just works with every app. It's compatible and everything like that. It's smooth, it's Twitter, gaming, everything. Whereas the iPhone 13 Pro Max, it goes down to 10 hertz when you're just staring at something, which puts a lot of strain on your eyes, and goes up to 120 when you're scrolling. And gaming apps like, let's say, PUBG still can't use the 120 hertz display, which is a bit redundant. Now let's go on to battery. This wins out a tiny bit. This, even though this has 10-hour battery life advertised, this is about 9, this is actually 10. Okay, so that wins out for me. It's not all bad news for the iPad Air. A few good things are it's got Bluetooth 5 over 4.2, and it's also got 60 FPS 4K recording, whereas this guy has 30. If you are one of those guys who records on your iPad, which I have never seen anyone do. Let's go on to the actual battery as well. The reason why the battery is a bit better on this guy, it's got a 8,134 milliamp battery, whereas this guy has only 7,605. Okay, so that tiny bit of a difference gives this guy a bit more juice to go on a bit longer. As you guys can probably see, it's fingerprint ID, whereas the fingerprint, this is not Face ID. Even though it looks like it's got Face ID, it's got fingerprint ID up there, which is called Touch ID. Now, other than that, they both have 4 speakers, as you can see. And this guy has USB-C charging, which is great. You can plug in all the USB-C dongles and stuff like that. This has lightning charging. They advertise the iPad as quick charging. However, this guy charges quicker than this. This came with a 20-watt charger. This comes with a 12-watt charger. I've put a 30-watt charger on both, and this charges just under 2 hours for me, whereas this takes more than 2 hours. Not a big difference, but just letting you guys know why this was such a good machine that is still, after what, now 5 years, it's still performing so well. Now let's go on to the front cameras while we are at it. They both have a 7 megapixel camera, and they do HDR recording, so they're both the same for that. This guy does 1080p with 60 frames. This guy does 1080p at 30 frames per second. That's the only difference. Also, the aperture for the iPad is 2 and the aperture for the iPad Pro is 2.2. Okay, now let's turn these bad boys around without scratching their panels. So in the back you have the True Tone flash, and same thing goes with this guy. It looks a tiny bit smaller, and also with the camera, they have the same sort of camera as well. So both are 12 megapixel, both have 1.5 aperture, and that's basically it. The only thing, as I said, is different is this guy does 4K at 60 FPS, this guy does it at 30. Okay, everything else is the same. Also, if you're going 1080p slow motion, this does 240, this does 120. I don't know, it's up to you what you guys decide. Both do HDR though, HDR recording. The release date, so this was released on the 15th of September 2020, whereas this was released in June 2017. Let's get to the most juicy part of this comparison. Both of these have 4 gigs of RAM. Okay, so they have equal amount of RAM, even though this is so much older. Not that this is any newer, it's still quite old. This is obviously 10.5 inch. This is 10.9, a tiny bit bigger, but again, it doesn't have that 120 Hz display. Both of them have facility for eSIM and nano SIM if you want to go put a SIM in there. Both came in Wi-Fi and cellular models, or LTE, or wherever you are, whatever you guys call it. Let's go on to the most juicy part, which is also the processor as well. So I'll tell you what this guy has first of all. So this guy has a hexa-core processor, which is a A14, okay, which is in your iPhone 12s, okay, and it's a 5 nanometer process that it's made on, so it's quite energy efficient. Having said that, it's got 2 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores at 1.8 gigahertz. It's got 4 GPU cores, so 4 GPU cores. All right, so let's go on to this guy. Okay, after doing this, so this is 5 years old. Okay, so first of all, it's on a 10 nanometer process, so it's not as efficient as this. However, as I said, the battery is a tiny bit bigger. That didn't really translate into real world testing. In real world testing, this guy still beats this guy out. This is brand new out of the box, and I've used this for 5 years now and still beats the battery on that, which is something to say about the battery life on these that is so good to me. So first of all, it's got a Apple A10X Fusion chip. Okay, so back when Apple was doing these, they had either the iPhone chip or the iPad chip. So anything in the iPad would get the iPhone chip and have an X in front of it and make it really good, and they would add GPU cores to it. But nowadays, they're just, in their cheaper versions, they're just taking the iPhone chip and just chucking it in there. So they're not putting in the extra GPU cores and making it an X variant, whereas back then they used to. Okay, so back then they had the iPhone with a A10 chip, but this had the A10X chip. So what is the A10X chip? So the A10X chip it has slightly less cores. However, it's got 3 performance cores and 3 hyper efficiency cores. Okay, and they're all operating at 2.38 gigahertz. This is where it comes really interesting and why this guy is still such a powerhouse. So we had said 4 GPU cores. GPU cores are used for your refresh rate on your screen and smoothness of display, like how your apps close and open, and most importantly, all the gaming and other apps that require that GPU grunt. 4, this has 12 GPU cores, and you can actually feel it when you're gaming. This guy is so smooth. I really like this guy. Another bonus that you get, so as you can see, no headphone jacks. Okay, let's see here. Guess what? It's got a headphone jack. Now, if you're gaming or you're using the iPad and you need to use your headphones where you need to plug it in, great, you can do that with that. However, you can't if you're charging it at the same time. So very good in that aspect. So let's get to my verdict. Straight off, if you're going to uni or whatever, you just need an iPad, you need a powerful machine or whatever. If you're gaming, I would still go the iPad Pro 10.5 inch secondhand somewhere if you can see it. I was looking at it before my review on Gumtree in Australia, and I saw it around even down to 350. I saw the 64 gig version and around 500, but 350 I saw it in one of the shops. This guy would cost you $900. So I rest my case. This is just Wi-Fi, no LTE, no 4G, nothing, just 64 gigs, $900. Yes, I appreciate you get a brand new device. This hasn't broken on me, and I'm sure if you buy on Gumtree from one of those secondhand retailers, they'll give you 3 months warranty. Given how good this thing is, battery life, screen, and everything is good for your eyes, and it still works so good, I still have to recommend this. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching it to the end. Let me know what you would like me to pair these two up against. Maybe the M1 iPad Pro, and see what's the difference between that and this guy and that, or maybe the iPad Air to the iPad. Let me know in the comments. Let me know what you guys think about these two iPads. Which one would you go for? Which one would you choose? Thank you so much for watching to the end. Take good care. Bye bye.